Hello, this is Cotton Stoops, and in today's Blooming Legacy How to Play and Defeat video, we're going to be going over Heatwave. Specifically, how to play and defeat Heatwave. We're going to be talking about a lot of synergies and teammates, such as the abusers, the setters, and the overall team compositions you'd want to run on Heatwave, and we're going to be talking about how exactly you play this playstyle. So with that out of the way, let's get right into the video. So the first section is going to be debriefing. This is going to be a section focused on how do you actually play this playstyle, because the playstyle is pretty much defined by its setters. And of course, we're going to be going over some abusers for that and some team compositions later into the video. So let's go over this really quickly. How to actually set up Heatwave? Well, you can just really look at it simply in a sense where, okay, you just soul burst with Krakaloa or you swap Billowforge in. However, due to their defensive typings and their resistances and their bulk, it is actually a lot more deeper than it really is. While Lava Fiend definitely has a lot more melee and range defense, with both of them being above or at 100, and its overall stats just being very defensively and very offensively oriented. However, this range attack stat, you won't be hitting too hard after a +2 burn up, which is going to come after the Heatwave rework. So Lava Fiend immediately has that bulk and that damage power to actually be pretty threatening now. However, you do need to get a soul burst up, which is going to be pretty hard unless you're like really leading this into the battle, mainly because regular Krakaloa just has a lot of a harder time to really swap in due to how passive it is and how it really doesn't do a lot of progress. However, differently from Lava Fiend, if you do not want to run this Lumion, you can run Billowforge. Now, other than being a pretty good anti-Bane of Haste Lumion, it has a pretty bad range defense stat and some middling HP and energy. However, what makes up for that lack of defensive utility is the fact that it has melee, range, and melee defense, all being above 100, and of course, with its coverage of fire, toxic, metal, and earth, you actually can hit a lot of stuff super effectively and neutrally. So Billowforge can not only take advantage of its own heat wave, but it can also support teams in a lot more of an offensive way. Now, due to the fact that they both cannot run pivot, their defensive typings are going to be a lot more important now, simply because you want to be able to get this in the battle and of course build around their weaknesses. Because these guys don't have pivot, you can't really get a lot of your offensive threats free in. Anyways, this is going to be a quick little section. There's really not much to talk about here other than its resistances. This mainly just goes to show how more defensive Lava Fiend is going to be having, and of course it's a lot of weaknesses that you will have to take in account of. In difference to something like Billowforge, it has these same resistances, but it doesn't have as much weaknesses, but still a lot less resistances than Krakaloa. So the really main thing that you really want to get out of these Lumions is that the best way to set up your weather is to lead the battle, Billowforge in specific, and Krakaloa, you want to get that soul burst as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and you want to utilize your defensive typing to swap into resisted hits, mainly Plant, Ice, and Brawler, because a lot of those Lumions are melee oriented, and you do have the best matchups against melee attackers because of your coverage, and because another thing, you can swap in on your walls. You actually do have a little bit of walls in the metagame, being 100, Tata, Breslin, Nevermare, and Flychomp. However, other than this, there's really not a lot of wall breakers or offensive Lumions you can really try and swap in on. So knowing what the opponent is going to be clicking in order to get into the battle with a resisted hit put against you is very consistent. Now, other than this, let's talk about some Heatwave abusers. So there are some Heatwave abusers, which first off, there's going to be a wall breakers here. Wall breakers such as Magmadire, Arceros, and Chartiki are the best Lumions. Now, the reasons why I did not include stuff like Ikazune is because that works more as a revenge killer and you don't really have the best bulk to set up or the best damage power at that. But all of these wall breakers have very high damage potential under Heatwave. For example, let's look at Arceros. Arceros can be doing as much as 45% to a Luminami running 200 HP, 200 melee defense. If the Luminami is running a 176 spread into the HP, then this does even more, so that's very great for you. And of course, you can guarantee a 2 KO against Jalusa with Arceros. So Arceros under Heatwave is immediately very threatening. The only real stuff that you do have to watch out for, as I guess you can't really watch out for a lot of stuff. I guess it's gonna have to be like Gargdi, or just watching what is gonna be swapping in on you. Fire types in general just can swap in on you pretty well. Light types as well. So you will have to be watching out for this, but Arceros overall pretty solid. And then as for Chartiki here, it ultimately has a 74.2% chance to hit KO a gas stroke. Of course, this is not taking into the account that burn up will be +2 under Heatwave, so you will be doing a lot more damage to gas stroke. And then as for power cuffs, which is most likely going to be your item other than a fire essence or a boots, you will be able to guarantee a 2-hit KO to a defensive Cleone. So these wall breakers definitely have the power, just so I can like prove it to you guys. I don't really need to prove Magmadire because it's already very strong. And then of course cleaners. Ikuzune and Infernix are going to be the main cleaners that you really want to try and use for your teams. Ikuzune I wouldn't really try to recommend because, for one thing, Chartiki is pretty good with boots, considering most of its swap-ins do not like getting boots off, so I wouldn't really run Ikuzune. I would most likely run Infernix once it gets that fire type rain rush ability, once Jamie gives it to it. It is promised. You can look in PvP discussion in the pinned comments, but other than that, Heatwave doesn't really have a lot of great cleaner options, so I would try my best to utilize some offensive cleaners like Zulong or Hunter, just the regular stuff. So because I haven't really gotten videos for Chartiki or Arceros, I am going to be recommending sets for them. And one more thing, I will be doing videos on Infernix when that comes out with its new ability. It really isn't that hard to build an Infernix though. You can just run 200 on range attack and speed, 4 energy, and then 96 HP. It's really not that deep because Infernix is a pretty simple Lumi to build. But anyways, this is going to be an ability of Inferno with Chartiki under Heatwave. Usually, this is going to be your ability of choice. I wouldn't see any other reason to run any other ability. You're going to be wanting to run setup with or you can run a Boots Wall Breaker set. Chartiki doesn't really need the setup too much. However, burn up is just nice anyways. Your personality is going to be very frail, smart, or nimble. This is mainly so you can have some speed advantages in the upper echelon of tiers. If you are running nimble, you are able to outspeed non-nimble Valkyries, which is always very solid, and everything below that. And of course, you're gonna be wanting to run smart to deal damage. If you are not worried about stuff like that, then you can just run very smart frail tender for maximum damage output. However, what I've learned is that running nimble, especially with boots, is just very good because one, you won't have a lot of setup time because your Inferno is constantly taking away your HP, so you really have a limited time frame. And for that reason, you can't really try and set up a lot. So honestly, I'd go with boots or the setup here. But if I were to choose, I'd run boots. Anyways, for the moveset, Nature's Force, Muck Blast, and Fire Breath. Nature's Force is going to be your stab, and of course, it is really only your other better move option. If you do not want to run Nature's Force, you can run Life Drain, because I guess it works because you give yourself a little bit more longevity, which I guess it's fine. And then Muck Blast and Fire Breath. Muck Blast is mainly going to be for the water types that you can't hit super effectively, and as well for some plant types. Like, I guess the main example is going to be Malmurk and Banfino. Muck Blast is also just pretty good to fish for poisons in general, which is just the main way you really want to use Muck Blast right now. And then Fire Breath is just so you can hit as hard as possible with your Fire Stab. Nature's Force is for some niche options. First off, you can hit Jalusa way harder with Nature's Force, and then Nature's Force also can help with Garg D, which is always very nice. And then as for your fourth move option, if you are going to be running a setup wall breaker, run Burn Up because it will be a +2 boost under Heatwave once Jamie puts that change in. And then Barter for the boots because you can triple stuff like Venolin and your other answers, so they have only one more move to really use, and which will help making predicting easier. Your item of choice is going to be the Fire Essence most of the time because Chartiki will be running with Arsaros, and Arsaros makes better use of that Power Cuffs because it does have that better energy stat. However, if you are not running Chartiki, or if you're not running Arsaros, then Power Cuffs is perfectly fine because you want boost on all of your moves. And then Specialty Boots is also another item you could run. Specialty Boots, of course, I already talked about it. And another item that I did not mention, but it's pretty niche anyway, you could run a choice of a shell. This is because if you really want to commit as a nuke with a +2 burn up under Heatwave, then I guess go ahead. I can't really stop you. And as for the TPs, 200 bridge attack and speed is to outspeed as much as possible while also being able to hit as hard as possible. For energy, you can't really benefit off of too much because your moves are pretty solid anyway. I think you'd have to also invest a lot into your energy to make use of your 50 costing moves. And then for the leftovers, 96 HP is just what you'd want to run. Anyways, Arsaros is going to be running a setup or a boots wall breaker set. Arsaros also like Chartiki doesn't really need a setup. However, boots will less be warranted on this because you need bulk up to beat stuff like Tundulin better, and I guess you can also count Namare or Iguana. Burning Rage is going to be so you can boost your Fire Stab even more. Sadly, you are not like an Inferno user, so that's really unfortunate. However, you do have better matchups against specific stuff. Personality is going to be Brawny or Nimble. If you are Brawny, then you can try and run Boots because that's more warranted. Brawny is just going to be the personality for this set. However, if you are running Nimble Boots, you do outspeed very Brawny Tatabs, smart Boots Ikazunes, very smart Deladrixes, very smart Land Torches, and of course you outspeed stuff like Zulong. So that's just pretty solid for your part. As for your moveset, you can run Outburst here. It is actually one of my first times I am recommending Outburst on Lulumian. This is mainly because Arsaros is going to be hitting very, very hard with bulk up. So running Outburst just for the maximum damage is just go ahead, I guess. Raging Tackle is going to be here for Iguanas and Nimares, so you can do that. Boiling Press here is just like a 5 base power difference from Flaming Kick. It's really not that deep. Boiling Press allows you to actually break through Luminami and Jalusa. And then as for your fourth move slot, Bulk Up or Near Enchantment is going to be what you're most likely going to be running. However, Fire Breath is also pretty good because for one matchup, if you are Power Cuffs or Fire Essence with Burning Rage and no investment, you're able to 2-hit KO a Tundulin with Fire Breath. So there you go. That's pretty funny. And then for your item, Power Cuffs, Fire Essence, Specialty Boots, you already know the drill. It's just like Chartiki's. And then for the TPs, you can run the same as Chartiki except you'll have some melee attack investment. However, what you could run is 128 HP, so you're able to take a 3-hit KO from a very brawny Jungle Jutsu Tatab. Of course, you do very well against Tatab because you 4 times resist its Plant Stab, which is just very solid anyways, and that's pretty much it. So with that out of the way, let's get to some team examples. Alright, so some Heatwave team examples. Now, there's going to be 5 total teams here. You can choose to take inspiration from any of them, or you can choose to use them. I don't really care, they're in this video for a reason. So first off, I'm going to be showcasing a pretty fun team, which is going to be a Facade offense team. We're going to be utilizing Magmadire's just great offensive presence on Heatwave and off Heatwave. Fun fact, you do live a tsunami from a Cleone under Heatwave, so you can break that, which is very funny. But the main way you really want to utilize this team is to use Facade to blow up walls. Usually, if you lead a Magmadire, they're most likely always going to be going into Cleone, Jalusa, which of course, you do very well against. Tatab under the facade as well is just pretty good because you can fade away stuff like Gear Snack, and that's pretty good. You can also take forms of other stuff like Forge, Infernix, and Eclipse. Eclipse in specific is also pretty good because you can bait in metal types, which of course then you can get a free Heatwave off with Forge, or you can apply pressure with Magmadier. Now, this team is running Luminami and Infernix. This team is both for pre-rework and post-rework. Infernix is just pretty good, I'd say, because it has defensive niches that you usually want, but this is mainly going to be utilizing for the post-rework once you get your Heatwave version of Rain Rush. And of course, Luminami here is just going to be the pivoter and the connector for a lot of these Lumians. Of course, the hazard removal on here is going to have to be Burn Up Infernix. However, it really isn't that deep because you have defensive utility with your bulk and your defensive typing. And what's even better is that you do get +2 with Burn Up. So you're not ultimately pretty bad with that. You can also run Burn Up on Forge, which is going to be +2 as well. So that's also funny. And then some side notes, you have to Fade Away and Barbs Up. Barbs actually does pressure the opponent into removing their hazards, so that can bring in your offensive Lumians a lot more easier. And then you can double a lot because this is offense by nature. Another team is going to be a more of a bulky offense oriented team where you're going to be wanting to run this core. This is going to be specifically for post rework, as you will be needing Infernix to be the Heatwave Rain Rush. Some side notes about this team is that you will be needing to dissipate a lot with Cleone. Cleone is pretty going to be your like the connector of sorts between all of your teams. Forge is just not that consistent enough to swap in on its own. And then other than this, we do have some other Lumens to help out our bulky offense. In order to not lose momentum while still keeping up some defensive niches, Eclipse is going to be here for stuff like Dragonin and Vesperatu, while your Florent here is going to be for opposing Eclipses. It works well against Soulburst Takuda and Lashent. It's also pretty good against stuff like Cleone. Well, not Cleone actually. Cleone it does not do well against. But other than this, you really want to try and utilize Arceros as much as possible. Arceros is going to be the main breaker here. And Chartiki, while it can break, you won't really want to try and run it too much on this, because it's most likely just going to be your revenge killer. If you do not want to run the boots, that is also perfectly fine, because you do have the Rain Rush Infernix. Other than this, you do have another team here, which is going to be Lava Fiend Balance. This is mainly going to be fitting for a lot of those people that just want some comfy meta teams, because the last two have not been meta at all, or at least for the most part. But side notes to this team is that this will be playing pretty defensively from the early and mid game, as per any team with Lava Fiend, because Lava Fiend doesn't really apply too much offensive pressure. Walls will have to be pivoted in and out to get damage with Chartiki and Arceros. Usually, you're most likely going to be having the opportunity to hit with these Lumians at the end of your Bane of Haste turns. Not Bane of Haste, your Heatwave turns. So that's pretty much the vibes that you will be having to utilize here. And of course, Lashent is going to be Brownie Robust for Joltooth. Other than that, these Lumians and their sets are pretty standard across all of them. Obsi is also for the Joltooth here. And then of course, I have another team which is going to be a lot more offensive now that we can run Tundulin. And then it's going to be a Lava Fiend Balance post rework. So now that you can run Tundulin with Lava Fiend, it was probably one of the best melee defensive cores, because you pretty much cover everything with that. That's pretty good. And of course, now that we can run Tundulin, we won't really need to run Cleone anymore, because it can just deal with whatever Cleone could do on the melee defense side. So now you can run something like Jalusa. Of course, this team will gonna have to be utilized by Burn Up, Lava Fiend, or Chartiki as their removal. Chartiki, of course, doesn't need to run boots. And then, of course, we have the other 4 Lumians that are staying intact with Hunder, Arceros, and Lashent. And one more final team, which admittedly is pretty niche, but it actually does work. It's going to be a double setter bulky offense. Some side notes to this team is that you should bring whatever setter would fare better in their matchups. Usually, one setter can do better than the other, specifically if, in Billaforge's case, if you are going up against a more of a defensive team, its offensive niches will be warranted a lot more better, which is just the best part about it. And of course, if you are going up against offense and you need to burn stuff to get chip and just be a passive wall, then of course, Lava Fiend is going to be for that. Oxydrake and Arceros here are just going to be just so you can utilize Arceros for your weathers, and then of course Oxydrake is going to be for opposing rain teams. Heatwave does pretty bad against rain as per the name suggests. And then of course for Harvestect is mainly going to be rain here for the earth type matchups. Heatwaves does pretty bad against stuff like Tyrex and Behemoth, so running Harvestect here just for the counterplay is good there. And then of course the Clips as the last slot, so you can stop yourself from getting swept by Dragodon. Oxydrake is also here for specific air types, specifically Snagoop and Namare, which are just pretty good against a lot of Heatwave teams in general. Alright, so now how to exactly stop Heatwave? Of course, this is very simple of a question, and I'm going to be going over all of the ways. You can't really counterplay a whole playstyle by bringing a whole team for it. It's just bringing Lumions for Heatwave is just enough in my opinion. And same goes for other weathers like Rain. So the best ways to really stop Heatwave is by running your own weather team by replacing the weather. Usually you do not want to live under Heatwave because if the opponent gets their Arceros or Chartiki on the battle, then it's pretty much a death sentence for you. However, you can run stuff like Deladrix, Chironix, or Plasmoth. Plasmoth under Thunderstorm will be a little bit better now because you will be getting stuff like Surebot and Tyrex that will be able to abuse it once those changes come out. And then as for Deladrix and Chironix, Deladrix is just good because it's rain teams. Nice. You do big damage under rain. And then for Chironix, post rework will be pretty mid. However, due to the fact that fog teams necessarily don't have to be dedicated fog teams anymore, Chironix will be a pretty good Lumion to it will be a pretty good Lumion to offset weathers without punishing its own teams, which I think is pretty solid of it. And then earth type anti-leads are also something I'd recommend. Tyrex, in case you haven't noticed, does really well against Heatwave because of its stabs. It does really well against that. Boots Behemoth is also another good option because a lot of these Heatwave teams are going to get undersped by Behemoth and they don't really have a lot of great earth resists. Then of course using a cleaner like Garg-A in the endgame is very good. If you can manage to take out their Infernix or their Boots Chartiki, then Garg-A is just gonna go in the late game, which is of course what you really want to do. And then air type anti-leads are also another option. Namare, Snagoop, and Morphezu are just very great. Like the main common theme that has been in most of Heatwave teams that I've seen is that they're all pretty weak to air, and because you can't really prep for air other than like bringing Oxydrake or a strong metal type, stuff like Morphezu and Snagoop and Namare are just going to be sweeping through teams. So that's pretty much it for me. Heatwave as a playstyle, in my opinion, is a pretty balanced playstyle, not in a sense where, oh, it's good, but it also has its counterplay. I feel like there's a lot of things bringing Heatwave down. On paper, once you get your setters in, it's just pretty much game over for the opponent. However, due to the fact that these Lumions do not have pivot, so you cannot slow pivot your offensive stuff in. So at most, you're most likely going to be getting your Lumions of that abuse Heatwave at turn 3 or 4. It's just pretty hard to really utilize Heatwave. So I feel like the best ways that you can really run Heatwave is passively and try and catch the opponent doing misplays with your Chartiki or Arceros, but at the end of the day, there's really not a lot of really good ways you can really try and utilize Heatwave. However, make sure you like the video and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. I will be doing a thunderstorm guide and a fog team guide, which honestly will be a lot more easier than Heatwave. But yeah, this is Cotton Stoops signing off to remind you that Zulong is still a dumpster fire.